Certainly, you would only give gold to the rich. Gold was the sign of power, and the sign of kingship. So this baby was to be a king, recognized by people from across the world. Frankincense, as I said, a very special incense, used still in churches, used in temples of different faiths. Frankincense was brought to Jesus as a sign of religious faith. That he was, in some way, though maybe at the time these men didn't understand how, as they didn't understand how he was going to be a king since he wasn't found in a palace, this baby was going to be some kind of a religious leader. They brought him the sign of priesthood. And then that other gift which is strange to bring to a baby, a herb. Not sure whether they brought the leaves or whether they brought it mixed with oil in this kind of way, but a herb which was a bitter herb. If you were to taste it, you'd find out. Myrrh. A herb which had certain properties and was used in abundance for the preservation of dead bodies. If someone had died, to make sure that the body did not go off and start to smell dreadful before the funeral, and to show reverence to the person who had died, myrrh would be used. Lots of it. Gathering the leaves and piling them on and wrapping them inside bandages to ensure that the body was protected even for the afterlife. I suspect it was one of those herbs that the Egyptians must have used when they turned the dead body into a mummy. And it was a herb that clearly was used in Israel and would have been among the herbs and the potions that the women brought to the tomb after Jesus had died on the cross. And so this herb was given by the wise men. I wonder if they understood what it really meant in Jesus' case. It was a herb that could be used for healing. And maybe that was what they first recognized. It was also a herb used at the time of death. And clearly, as we look back through the time when the gospel was written, and this was written down only after the death and rising of Jesus from the dead, as we look back through hindsight, it's very clear what the gift meant. It had to do with the sacrifice that God was making in giving his Son to die for the life of the world. And so, perhaps unwittingly, or perhaps with even greater insight than even those around in Bethlehem had, the wise men brought these three gifts, as three symbols of facets of the life that would be, the life of Jesus. Of course, as we read about what happened, we find it wasn't all plain sailing. Even for those wise men, though they had what they considered the best of guidance, for a short while they lost their way. They didn't find Bethlehem. As they came close, and very close, because Bethlehem is only a few short kilometers away from Jerusalem, as they came close, they began to think their own thoughts, rather than follow the guidance of God, or perhaps even those stars. And they ended up in Jerusalem, thinking, it's a king we have come to give these gifts to. Where are kings born? In what kind of family? Well, the family of the king himself. We're getting near. We are near Jerusalem. Herod's palace must be the place that is our goal. And as they got near, they must have grown in certainty. The sign was still there. Their own GPS was directing them. Well, they needed a bit more direction before they got to Bethlehem. They gained that direction even in the palace of King Herod. Surprisingly, maybe to us, just as it was a surprise, and is a surprise, continues to be for many Christians today, to learn that people of other faiths have been drawn among the first to seek Jesus. Surprisingly for us, because Herod was not going to be a friend to Jesus. Herod turns out to be his worst enemy, at least at that time. But even though he was his worst enemy, even though he was going to conspire to do away with this baby, he gave good directions, or at least his wise men. His scribes there in Jerusalem knew where to look. They knew to look in the scriptures, their own scriptures, to find indications as to where these visitors should journey on. And Herod, in his own way, wanted to know. And he said, when you found him, come back and tell me, so that I can go and worship him too. I wonder if you've ever been on a journey and got lost. Is there anyone who has travelled in a car, with friends, or alone, and got lost on the way? No? My goodness, you're still so young. You've never been lost. Right, one more confessing. Any more? Have you ever got lost on a journey? You've been looking for a house in Thailand and you just can't find the street name. Certainly can't see it in English. Or somebody has told you which way to go. It happened to us just last week. There is this big museum. Some of you have been there, I know, because Mei Ling's taken you. The Museum of Taiwanese History, right? Who's been there? Okay. It's an interesting place, but it's quite new. It's only been built in the last 2 or 3 years, and we'd never been there before. But we were told we should go. As it happened, we went on the first day that it was open for paying visitors, Until then, people had been able to get in for nothing. But we decided, along with a lot of others it seemed, because the car park was full when we got there, to go on the first day when we had to pay. But it was worth it when we got there. Now, we set off from the middle of Tainan to a place which is only just to the north of Tainan. It's in Annan district, and Pei-Ling knows it very well because her sister lives in that area. So we went up the road. We saw a sign to it, but we decided not to follow that one because we knew better. Annan was nearer if we went down a different road. And we were not wrong at that point. No. As we went up that other road, we saw signs. So it confirmed we were right after all. We saw signs straight on. These little brown signs that show you places of interest, and written in Chinese and in English, of course, so that tourists can find them. We went up the road, we saw another sign, straight on. We went along the road further, and another, slightly to the right. We followed it. There was another sign, straight on, and we went straight on. And we kept going. And we kept going. We crossed a river, and we said, that's strange. But we kept going for a little while, and then we said, no. There had been no other signs. We'd both been looking so carefully and driving fairly slowly. So we did a U-turn, as you do. Anywhere, any road, you can do a U-turn. Someone in a big crossroad just yesterday, between Linsen Road and Shaodong Road. You know that big crossroad just next to the university? I saw a car doing a U-turn right in the middle of that crossroad. Amazing. You can do them anywhere. We did a U-turn and we came back. There was a sign. Yes, we'd done the right thing in turning back, straight on, back where we'd come. And then, at a junction which had not been labelled, I'm quite sure about that, it was not labelled from the other direction, but from the north, it directed us to the museum again. We were on track again. And we found it. A bit stubborn, some of us. We don't like to stop and ask someone who knows, someone local who might know better than we do. Do you know anyone like that, apart from me? We know where we're going. We're quite sure of it. We don't need to ask. To open the window would interfere with the air conditioning. But we got there. We were directed along the road, and we came to a sign that told us to do a U-turn, an official U-turn. And we went back, away from this big building that we saw ahead, back to a car park, which was full. But someone was leaving. So we went in, and we walked. It was about 200 meters, I should think, to walk from there to a sign that said tickets. There was no sign anywhere in there that said this is the museum, but there wasn't anywhere else, so we got in. It was easy. It would have been easy to have thought, no, it can't be, but it was. Anyway, we got there. Rather like another occasion when we went on a church outing and we got lost. Augustine will remember this well. Instead of going to the place we were intended to go to, we came to another place which was quite interesting. We were going out into the mountain area, and I've forgotten what the place was called where we were heading. Can you remember? No. But I was driving, following Mei Ling. following her because she knew where she was going. She had GPS in her car. It was a new car. So, we knew, she knew that we'd get there. And we went along the road. We saw signs to the place where we intended to go. We saw signs, and actually, some among us knew pretty well which direction we wanted to go. Going up this road, straight through a town, and suddenly, quite unexpectedly, Mei-Ling's car switched off to the left. Now, we knew that we should be going straight on, but she had GPS. She knew better. We ended up nowhere near the place we'd intended to go to, but in Zion, of all places. We had arrived in Zion, Mount Zion. Wonderful. Jerusalem is built on Mount Zion. Okay? Well, that proved to be probably far more interesting than the place that we'd intended to go to. It's a Christian sect that has built a community out there in the mountains. They don't want to have anything to do with other people, really. Certainly not the government, paying taxes and things like that. They have separated themselves off, and they've complained about how they've been oppressed on occasion by governments. But there's sincerity there, there's integrity, though we felt perhaps a little bit wayward. But it was an interesting day, visiting such a community and finding that kind of community here in Taiwan. We didn't take the trouble to ask anyone about the route that we should have gone, because we found that was probably where God wanted us to go that day. Have you ever been on a journey and taken the wrong turning? Well, travelling around now is becoming so much easier. I don't yet have a car with GPS in it, but perhaps one day I will. All kinds of things get presented to us through technology now. But of course that's not the journey that I was really thinking about for now. It's that journey that we are making through life. I won't ask just now for anyone who thinks they have taken the wrong turn at any time in life. We might have some explaining to do as to where we thought we were going, where we wanted to go, and why we made the mistake, or were willful in not following the best way. As life goes on, you'll find there are lots of side turnings off the track that perhaps we should be taking. Plenty of them, plenty of opportunities, and sometimes we take them. So what is the journey that we should be on? Following the example of the wise men, the Magi. Well, we know it already. A sign of that is that we are here. A journey seeking, as they were seeking, Jesus. A journey that begins whenever we first hear that that should be our goal. We've been through that first stage, and we're here. A journey that doesn't stop right through our lives. And a journey that gives us plenty of opportunities to take wrong turnings, to run at full speed and miss turnings that we should take. A journey that provides us with lots and lots of choices. We make our choices, and then we either regret or we give thanks. God has invited us to share in this journey with the wise men. We will inevitably come to Herod's palace from time to time. We will be up against those who want either to use what we are doing with our lives and to use us for their own ends, or will simply want to send us along another way, perhaps again for their own selfish reasons. So we have to be ready. We have to be prepared. Now, how do we keep on the right road? Well, I suppose it's not by being stubborn in the way that I'm stubborn when I'm travelling. Stubborn in another way, that we don't lose sight of that goal. The goal which is seeking Jesus, so that we may follow him and work in line with what God has planned for us. How do we do it? Well, one answer we've all picked up today, and it's here. And it's an answer that the Magi also had. Not at their fingertips, because it wasn't part of their religious faith. But the Bible was readily available there in Herod's palace. It was available for Herod's wise men to seek the answer. They must have had a pretty good idea what they were looking for, because if you or I, without knowledge of the Bible, tried to look for Bethlehem without a Bible dictionary, concordance, some way of looking for it, it would probably take us ages to find reference to Bethlehem if we didn't know where to look. They knew where to look. They knew, and they found it very quickly, and were able to come back to Herod and say, here it is. We know. We're absolutely certain. And they were. Bethlehem. That's the place. Send them to Bethlehem. That's where they will find a new king that has been promised in the Bible. That was a shock for Herod. He did not want a rival. Even a rival this size. As we know, he did his best to get rid of that imposter. But of course, he didn't manage it. Of course, God was more than one step ahead of him all the time. So our first reference point along the way has to be to search in the scriptures. How do we do that? Well, as the wise men did, they asked. It didn't seem to matter who they asked, good or bad. They asked someone who in the end turned out to be tricking them, turned out to be completely in opposition to their mission. But God was with them. And God caused that admission from the scribes. Bethlehem was the place to look. Even from Herod's palace came the right answer. And then the wise men went out. They looked up in the sky again. They found confirmation. There was the star, clearly. As they looked, it's difficult, isn't it, to see where a star is actually over. In Tainan it's even more difficult because we can't see many of the stars. It's always so misty, or the atmosphere is filled with clouds of dust. When you look up in a clear sky, so many stars. But at that moment, a certain star was shining so bright and so clear. Confirmation was given. In their language, in their religious terms, to people from another culture, another nation, another religion. We can look for the signs. When we start looking, the surprising thing is we see them. We find them. Have you ever found you've learned a new word perhaps, and then the next day you're reading something, that word glares out at you from the page, and you know why you learned it. We look for signs, we find them. What might they be? They might be the simple meeting with somebody who has a question. Suddenly you find God has given you an answer for them. It might be something that completely redirects your life, that causes you to make a turning one way or another, but it's a turning that God directs you to. Looking for signs is not such a bad thing. Not for the kind of signs that superstitious people look for. In England it might be a black cat running across your path and you're feeling, oh, I mustn't do anything today, I've got a very unlucky day. Stay inside. It's not the sign of the fact that the Chinese word for the number 4 sounds the same as the word for death. It's not that kind of superstitious sign that people are always so edgy about. You'll see, it's clearly going to be a sign that comes from God. And it'll be a sign saying, look, I need you to share love, to share my word with somebody, or to act on the word, because there is a need for you particularly to act today. Signs amazingly come up. Someone asked one of the archbishops of Canterbury one time, do you really believe that prayers are answered by God? Don't you think, when your prayers are answered, that and something happens that you think is an answer to prayer, don't you think it's just a coincidence? He said, well, yeah, you may be right. But what I find is, if I don't pray, the coincidences don't happen. Well, of course, that's totally logical as well. But it was the word of a man of great faith, and a word from a man of prayer. And there's another of our guiding principles, that we should pray. Pray to ask God to direct us. Yes, I want to see Jesus. That means I want to be with Jesus, walking along his path. Please God, show me that path. You may think it's coincidence. Something will happen that shows you the way. It may be simply because the prayer has acted on some memory in your own memory and sparked a thought that has guided you. Remembering, yes, I was going to do that 2 years ago. This is the time, isn't it? These are our guiding principles. And then also fellowship. We've got the scriptures, we've got prayers, but it's very clear that this happens in community. If we're uncertain that this is God guiding us, we can ask our friends. If we're uncertain whether or not we should ask for prayers for healing for ourselves or for someone else, you can be quite sure when you ask your friends, they will say yes and confirm that this is God's will for you. Or is this the right direction for me to take? And in consultation with others, we work things out in our minds. In consultation with those who are also on the same journey. Do not stop meeting together. Don't lose the habit. Was that Ephesians or Hebrews? Hebrews. The word to the Hebrews was, do not give up that habit of meeting together. People often ask, but I can be a Christian on my own, can't I? I don't have to go to church. You'll be so much the poorer for it, if that's what you decide to do. And also, from times, even short times, when I've not been able to get to a church on a Sunday, not being part of a fellowship maybe, you'll sense a kind of lostness and realise that we need each other to share in that journey, to confer with each other the direction that we take. And perhaps even in this community we don't talk about that enough with each other. What do you think you are doing that puts you on that path to find Jesus, the way that Jesus wants you to find him and experience him and work with him? What are you doing? What am I doing? Are we doing the right thing? Well, then we pray about it together. And the prayers of God's people, Jesus instructed us, should be done together. Yes, we can pray alone, and he showed us by his own example as he went out in the hills early morning very often to pray on his own. That's good. And he also said, wherever 2 or 3 people come together in my name to ask God about something, their prayer will be answered. Those are his words. And so, of course, that brings us to the most important point. Along the way, how do we find Jesus? Then we discover we can actually meet with Jesus in prayer. We can ask Jesus, if that's our wish, to show himself to us. Don't be scared to ask, but be brave, because when Jesus shows himself to us, he also shines a light on us, into us. And we find in a flash all the things that have kept us, if we are still searching, that have kept us searching and not finding what we should. sinfulness, our idleness, all the things that set us apart from God. Things that are of our own doing, our own making. So be brave, because that light will shine. But as that light shines, it also cleanses and heals. The wise men, after they had met with this baby, knew that they had been in the presence of God. They also found themselves being directed along their journey. In a dream, they were told not to go back to Herod. And they obeyed. They obeyed what God had spoken to them. Symbolically and in a very real way too. They were changed. They had been challenged by that experience, and they were changed. They'd been challenged not only to look at the stars, but to listen to a God who would speak to each one of them personally. And they had agreed to be part of that covenant with God. Now they had found Jesus. There would be no looking back. We come as people who are on the journey, still seeking, and yet have already found. We have questions to be answered. We still will have questions when those have been answered. We will still move on the journey, sometimes tentatively, sometimes confident. We journey together, and it is a journey that we travel, surely with joy. Such joy as we found in that reading from Isaiah. Come to the King. Nations, whole nations will come to the King. And through that, and through the words of the psalm too, we find that not just individuals, but the whole world is being changed. So come and meet that child born in Bethlehem. Find in him that challenge for yourself and exercise the authority that he gives to you also to make that change, to be part of God's work, challenging and changing the world. Thanks be to God for his word to us. Amen.
Amen.